why we chose this session. So early on in the RSSP, we just did some polling and surveying about what folks were interested in, and found that LMS support was something that a lot of folks were looking for some extra help in, especially when it comes to like instructional design and how do you really maximize that LMS. And so we spoke with Mitzi and the Engage to Learn team, who have a lot of expertise in this area and are excited to be able to offer you the session this morning. I think we're all probably familiar with this slide at this point with our power move to support remote learning aligned with the Effective Schools framework. And then of course our superpower moves. And we're kind of touching on two superpower moves this morning, which is the 1C focused on LMS, and then also 5C focused on differentiation, because that's what we'll be kind of focusing in on. So we're really excited to be able to offer this support to you. Please do engage, ask questions, use the chat. We want this to be interactive and as relevant for you as possible. So please don't hesitate to engage in whatever way makes the most sense for you. With that, I think I'll pass it back to Mitzi and the Engage to Learn team. And again, thank you all for being here.
Awesome, thanks so much. Again, my name is Mitzi. My title is Executive Director for Partner Success, partners being LEAs, and we're just really excited to be with you today. This is my 20th year in education, and it doesn't feel like that at all, but I was a classroom teacher, instructional specialist, and then also worked at the district level before joining Engage to Learn. And so part of my role as an instructional specialist was to help teachers implement strategies such as differentiation. And so we're excited to be able to bring this content to you today. And then I'm going to introduce Lucy, really, which is our star of the show today. She's going to be conducting most of the session, and she'll tell you a little bit about herself.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having us. Lucy Elizondo, Executive Director of Partner Success, similar to Mitzi. Clearly, we work with different partners typically, but today we both have the pleasure of working with you all, and we're so happy about that. I was also a classroom teacher, bilingual, elementary was what I always taught, campus leader and district leader. I worked with Cy-Fair ISD, with Houston ISD for a long time. I've been with Engage to Learn for a few years now, and I have loved all of that work because it all enables me to keep thinking about instruction and working with students and teachers, which is so much fun. I'll turn it back over to Mitzi.
Awesome. So we are actually going to show you a quick little hook video. It's a quick piece of a TED Talk just to kind of prime your thinking. If anybody is seeing this, I hope you'll immediately start to make some connections between the topic and the TED Talk and differentiation. And if not, this video, we're not playing the whole thing, but I'll put the link to the whole TED Talk in the chat because it's really great to be able to share with anybody in education, just when you begin to think about differentiation, how many other ways in which we really consider the myth of average.
County stage, Todd Rose.
It's 1952, and the Air Force has a problem. They've got good pilots flying better planes, but they're getting worse results, and they don't know why. And for a while, they blamed the pilots. They even blamed the technology. And they eventually got around to blaming the flight instructors. But it turned out that the problem was actually with the cockpit. Let me explain. Imagine you're a fighter pilot. You're operating a machine that in some cases can travel faster than the speed of sound, and where issues between success and failure, sometimes life and death, can be measured in split seconds. If you're a fighter pilot, you know that your performance depends fundamentally on the fit between you and your cockpit. Because after all, what good is the best technology in the world if you can't reach the critical instruments when you need them the most? But this presents a challenge for the Air Force because obviously pilots are not the same size. So the issue is, how do you design one cockpit that can fit the most individuals? For a long time, it was assumed that you could do this by designing for the average pilot. That almost seems intuitively right. If you design something that fit for the average size person, wouldn't it fit most people? It seems right, but it's actually wrong. And 60 years ago, an Air Force researcher, Gilbert Daniels, proved to the world just how wrong this really is and what it was costing us. Here's how he did it. He studied over 4,000 pilots, and he measured them on 10 dimensions of size. And he asked a very simple question. How many of these pilots are average on all 10 dimensions? The assumption was that most of them would be. Do you know how many really were? 0. Gilbert Daniels proved there was no such thing as an average pilot. Instead, what he found was that every single pilot had what we call a jagged size profile, right? It means no one's at the same on every dimension. And this makes sense. Just because you're the tallest person doesn't mean you're the heaviest. It doesn't mean you have the broadest shoulders or the longest torso. But this is tricky because if every pilot has a jagged size profile and you design a cockpit on average, you've literally designed it for nobody. So the Air Force realized they had a problem. And their response was bold. They banned the average. Meaning that moving forward, they refused to buy fighter jets where the cockpit was designed for an average-sized pilot. And instead, they demanded that the companies who built these planes design them to the edges of dimensions of size. Meaning that rather than design for, say, the average height, they wanted a cockpit that could accommodate as close to the shortest pilot and the tallest pilot as the technology would allow. Now, the companies that made these planes, as you could imagine, weren't happy, right? They argued and lobbied, and they said it's going to be impossible, or at least impossibly expensive, to build a flexible cockpit. But once they realized that the Air Force wasn't going to budge, suddenly it was possible. And it turned out it wasn't that expensive. And in fact, they made great strides, leveraging simple solutions that we all take for granted in our everyday lives, like adjustable seats. And as a result, the Air Force not only improved the performance of the pilots that they already had, but they dramatically expanded their talent pool. And today, we have the most diverse pool of fighter pilots ever, but here's the thing. Many of our top pilots would have never fit in a cockpit designed on average. So, most of us have never sat in the cockpit of a $150 million fighter jet, right? But we've all sat in the classroom.
So as we begin to see the video and just the parallel between the analogy and the fighter pilot example, and then as we begin to think about differentiation, I have a couple of things I would like you to consider. So we can use the chat or you can come off mute. I just want you to consider this piece. So how does designing to the edges apply to differentiating for students? So I know that last picture of the classroom in rows, how would you say that designing to the edges could apply to students? Anybody want to come off mute or just want to share in the chat?
Well, I think whenever you're building, how this pertains, this analogy would pertain. So when you're building lessons, you're not, you're thinking about your students that are up here, but you're also thinking about your students down here and the ones that are going to struggle with it and the ones that are going to get it pretty easily, and trying to figure out a way that you can have an engaging lesson where it pertains to all of those students.
Yep, that's great. Thanks so much for sharing, Christopher. Anybody else have any thoughts? One thing that I kind of thought about is the companies felt like it was going to take a lot of money and it was impossible. And sometimes that's some responses that we get from educators, right? It's going to take too much time. It's not possible for me to meet the needs of every individual student in my class. Raise your hand if you've heard that ever from anybody you've worked with. But in all actuality, it might save you time on the back end if you really begin to think about differentiation and how you might support students on the front end with some pre-planning. The next question that I have for you is, how can you utilize Schoology or another LMS to implement differentiation? So when you begin to think about, when you're in a classroom and you're not in a remote learning environment, you're kind of able to meet needs of different students very easily, but how might we actually leverage an LMS to be able to do that? So any thoughts right before we get into the content of the actual session?
I'll throw out there, one of the things that I'm most excited about for teachers is that they have the ability to assign different students different activities, so they can assign learning that's more on the kids' individual learning level, or they could be to groups of students, or there's just a lot of tools and a lot of opportunities using Schoology that teachers are going to be able to take advantage of. And actually, with time, like you said, I mean, it's all about learning how to do it and what tools are available and what does it look like. But once you've done that initial learning, at the end of the day, it's really going to make it easier for teachers to do that.
Yep, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing, Lauren. Anybody else want to add any thoughts before we jump right in? All right. Our objective in today's session is to, really help everybody that's attending to apply 4 different differentiation strategies leveraging Schoology. And we're going to consider differentiating assignments, different discussion groups, the idea of choice boards, and different grading options. So we're going to chunk out the information. So we'll do a little bit of learning, and then you'll also be able to go into some collaborative breakout rooms that we have created so that you can discuss not only what you learned, but how you might apply this as a classroom teacher, also how you might bring this back to your LEA and really get it implemented so that it impacts student outcomes. So our agenda for today is we're really going to think about what are the 4 steps to actually differentiating specific technical features of Schoology that help us to differentiate. So differentiating assignments, discussion groups, grading groups, and choice boards, and then also giving you some processing time to actually do some action planning and next steps. So you will have an idea pad with some resources on it. And so Dawn's going to put the link to the main folder into the chat for everybody. And when you're opening that folder, you will your LEA will have a name. And so you can click on that LEA, and within that folder, you'll have an idea pad that you should have edit access to. If more than one person is here from your LEA, we named the idea pad so you wouldn't be confused on whose idea pad was whose. And then you'll also have an example of a choice board template that we provided that you'll also have edit access and is your copy to keep as well. You'll notice from the screenshot of the idea pad that it's organized with the 4 steps to differentiating with Schoology at the top. And then the ways to differentiate are down the left-hand side, and then you'll have Schoology and THL 3.0 resources linked in that column. There's a place for notes and reflections, and then for action planning and next steps. The links on your actual idea pad are view only, but you are able to make any copies of those as well. So just wanted to kind of do a idea pad description so you can kind of know the resources as you go through. So the last piece that I'm going to share with you guys are just really the 4 different ways or 4 steps to differentiating with Schoology. One is really determining what the method of differentiation that you want to use with your students. So we're going to talk about 4 different ways today, but that's kind of your first step. How do you want to differentiate? The second thing is to locate or design a pre-assessment that yields data that informs you of your students' learning level or interest. Because really that data is going to really provide you with where your students currently are or their interest, and it'll help you make the differentiation more meaningful for them. Step 3 is to curate resources to support the students based on their learning levels or interest. These don't necessarily mean that you're designing all these resources from the ground up. THL 3.0 has amazing resources that we're going to highlight today. And then the last step is to leverage Schoology's technical features to provide students with differentiated learning. And so for here, I'm going to actually stop sharing and pass it over to my colleague Lucy, and she's going to conduct the remainder of the session.
Thank you, Mitzi. Okay, just checking. Everybody can see my screen? Perfect, we'll get started. So I shared with you that I was an elementary school teacher. You would have already known that if you'd seen my lessons. You'll be able to tell. Just an overall focus. We talked about 4 different differentiation strategies that we'll be working through. However, just for unity and uniformity across the session, we're going to focus on one particular lesson this whole time. And what the lesson is relating multiplication to the array model. There's the array. And a little bit of added information. All of this, this entire lesson will come from the Eureka Math series that is available to you all through TEA, through THL. What I did here, just for the sake of making it quick for this lesson, I downloaded it out of the Eureka Math THL Access. And what you can see here is just the PDF version, again, just for quick access. But just scrolling through very quickly, you'll be able to see that it has a lot of instructional information for the teacher to go through and understand what the lesson is that's being taught, relating multiplication to the array model. Then as we scroll down toward the bottom, we have the actual work that's a fluency practice. The work that you can do with the students for gradual release and scaffolding. It's all there for you. And again, I don't work for Eureka Math, but I had a lot of fun working with these materials because they were just so well done. The scaffolding is built in. And so this is the particular lesson that I'll be working with throughout. So it is lesson 2. You'll see it labeled. And again, you probably have a link to that in your idea pad, I'm guessing. And so I just wanted to show you what all of the work that we'll be doing today focuses back on this. The very first piece that we're looking at is differentiating assignments. And I think Lauren mentioned that's I guess a technical feature that she's already looked at. So just very quickly here. We're going to talk about differentiating assignments within Schoology. We'll take a look at it in Schoology itself, but there's the screenshot. It's those 3 dots right there, that triangle, that's going to allow you to do that once you get to Schoology. In this particular example, we're differentiating. So I would be, in this example, either an ESL or a bilingual teacher. So I have TELPAS data. And my TELPAS data indicated to me that some of my students might need the information presented in Spanish. And that's what we're doing in this first section. What I decided to rely upon is a math journal. Those of us who have taught have used journals forever, but I was thinking about in a hybrid environment, how is a math journal going to help the teacher out? Well, thinking about that, a concrete reference for students and the families throughout the year, it's something that everybody can look to and easily refer to when they're trying to help answer questions. Available to the students, even if they lose their Wi-Fi access, they've still got their math journal. Equally available to students both on-site and remote. So that's one piece that's really easy to have for both sets of students if you're teaching in that situation. Then again, if your students are transitioning between learning environments, which we know they do, they'll have continuous access to that one journal. So definitely, it's just an instructional strategy I would probably be using. I would highly recommend. Now to the technical feature piece of it, individualizing assignments. So individualizing assignments, if you need to assign extra credit, if you need to modify a test or an assignment, or even a page with personalized instructions for one or more students. Now what I have linked here is it's just the instructions in Schoology, and I'm sure you have them on your IdeaPad as well. So there's very specific instructions available step by step how to do that in Schoology with a lot of added information. So that's available to you there. A few other considerations when you're thinking about individualizing assignments. Students are only going to be able to see what's assigned to them. So if you have 3 or 4 different assignments, but you've only assigned them to a subset of students, it avoids confusion, keeps everything cleaner if they're only able to see what you've assigned to them. So that's perfect. Grades can be entered for students only if materials are assigned to them. And we'll look at grading groups more thoroughly later on. But for the moment, just you could assign to individuals or also to students. Also, you can organize your materials by folders and assign entire folders. That's an option too. So in this example, I took that same concept, multiplication with the array model, and I made 2 very quick videos. I don't have to play them for you. I think you probably have them on your IdeaPad anyway. I made 2 really quick videos, the same way any teacher would teach vocabulary at the beginning of a lesson, taught them the vocabulary and allowed the students to walk through and add that vocabulary to their own math journals. What I did though is I did it in 2 languages. Again, it's quick, it was 2 minutes each. So I did one in English, one in Spanish. The purpose here is we know that in this example, this lesson it's a 3rd grade lesson. By 3rd grade, most of the students are going to be using primarily English. We'll have a handful that still need the Spanish. So in that situation, I could take and assign the Spanish version just to the students who need that. To those particular students, I might even assign them both, the English and the Spanish, so we can start pulling in the English. And again, this was differentiated based on TELPAS level. I'm going to step over to Schoology for just a moment. So here we have the 3rd grade lesson. I'm going to expand. I had the folder where I mentioned we could assign folders, and we could also assign the whole folder. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to open up the lesson. There's the 2 lessons, the English and the Spanish, and you'll be able to see here, if I edit, I could go down here and I could individually assign to those 5 or so students that need it in Spanish. So they'll be able to see the video and record the vocabulary in Spanish because they need it that way. The other students who don't need that would not see that assignment. So again, that's one of the more commonly used. And one second. There we go. I'll show you one more time. The lesson is there. It's been linked. And there it is. Of course, typically when you're recording vocabulary or working in a journal, often it's ungraded. So this one was ungraded, but still in both situations, I can get the correct assignment to each student. Probably in this situation, I might get it to them before the actual lesson, so that they've been introduced to the vocabulary. They have the vocabulary on hand and available before the lesson begins. So asynchronously is a good option for that. The other thing that we're always needing to think about is which model is supported. at your campus, at your district, which of these models are you working with? And again, differentiating assignments can work in any of those models when you think about it. Now, before we go to our breakout rooms, I just want to check, is there any questions or comments, or even somebody have some new ideas to add to that? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get ready to go to breakout rooms. A few things, and just to let you know, at the top of your idea pad, these same instructions are there, so you don't have to memorize this. But as we go to our breakout rooms, I know that we have people in different roles. We'll have some people who are teachers. We might have some people who are campus leaders. Others are district leaders. So thinking about this particular differentiation option, differentiating assignments, how would you use it as a classroom teacher? How could you use it to impact student outcomes? And if you are in a leadership position, how would you relay this information for differentiating assignments to the teachers so that they have easy access to the same information? So we will go ahead and do that. And also start thinking about a plan for implementing differentiation of assignments within your areas. Any questions about the breakout? I hope that you'll take some time to learn from each other, because I know that we all come with different expertise and experience, and I'm sure we all have a lot to discuss. Magga mentioned she really appreciated chatting with her group, some good intentional thinking about leveraging existing structures in Schoology at Ector County and Sherman. Awesome. Okay, so differentiating discussion groups. In this section, we're going to create 3 different discussion groups, but we're doing this based on pre-assessment. Again, here's just a screenshot of what it will look like, but we'll pop over to Schoology in a moment and take a look at that. So differentiating by pre-assessment data. So I keep acting like I'm an advertisement for Eureka Math, and I'm not. I just really enjoyed working with it and enjoyed the resources that are made available by TEA in this situation. So again, we have lesson 2. I mentioned to you earlier, we were working through lesson 2, that whole bit multiplication with arrays. What I shared earlier with you was the lesson itself and notes for the teacher, but it also comes with the pre-assessment. So again, I downloaded it just for ease of use here, but you can see this is not a pre-assessment that the students are going to take all day taking. This is 8 questions that give the teacher the information that he or she needs to move forward with the lesson. And so that's all that is. Again, it's probably linked there, and you would also have access to it. The other really fantastic thing for me is you can create the groups, again, based on the pre-assessment. However, if you pull up the teacher guide that's included, that teacher guide will give you everything you need to know in order to differentiate. So I'm going to just scroll through this particular teacher guide. So this one is telling me for each of the questions, remember it was 8 questions. For each of those 8 questions, what is the foundational knowledge that the student needed to know? On question 1, it was discern equal groups from unequal groups. But the really great thing is that it has resources to go with it to help you to differentiate. So you're not scrambling trying to find resources to differentiate with. They're all there. So you could click on, I think this is a live link. Let me check. So that is the differentiated leveled supporting resources that you'll need if your student missed item number 1, everything you would need to teach it, including the instructions for the teacher and the work itself. So it's all there for you, and I just wanted to share that. Anyway, I created those 3 discussion groups based on a couple of pieces of information, the results of the pre-assessment and the information and tools provided to me in that teacher guide. So we'll go ahead and move forward. So the technical feature again is discussion groups. Using those discussion groups, teachers can create interactive discussions for students to respond to any post by other students. The link that I have there that's also on your idea pad is just the quick instructions from Schoology on how to create those discussion groups. A few things to think about with the discussion groups. If you add them to folders, you can keep the materials more neatly organized as opposed to seeing just too many different assignments scattered. They can also be individually assigned to students. You could choose to apply grades to discussion groups. And of course, we think about discussion groups used asynchronously, but another way to think about them is to use them in small groups. So what if we were to, in a Zoom link or in a Microsoft Teams or whatever your school is using, what if we were to leverage those discussion groups for small group instruction? And we'll take a closer look at that. What I did here, again, based on that pre-assessment and that teacher guide that I showed you, I have 3 different discussion groups. So I found that some of my students, let's say half of my students, were on level. They were ready for this lesson. They were prepared to start learning what we needed to know for multiplication with arrays. There is a really excellent Nearpod activity that I found. It's perfect for it. Teaches it exactly like I would have taught it. I won't go through it, but there it is. It's really cute and it's perfect. But anyway, so that would have been something that I could send in a discussion group to my students who are on level, ready to go. Secondly, I found that one of my, or a handful of my students only missed number 8. And what that meant, according to the teacher guide, was that they just needed help with skip counting by 5. Well, there's a video, of course, there's probably lots of videos on skip counting by 5. So that's my second discussion group. Then finally, I have some students that need a lot of support. Maybe they missed 5, 6, and 7. And if I check the teacher guide, that tells me that they need help with repeated addition and arrays. Of course, if they can't do repeated addition, they're going to have a hard time with multiplication. So it makes sense that I need to teach that first. And I learned all that just from the teacher guide. Anyway, so those are my 3 discussion groups that I could, again, choose to use either asynchronously or synchronously, depending on my need and depending on the instructional model that I'm working with. I'm going to step out for just a moment over to Schoology. I got so much stuff open. Okay, so I labeled this one supporting activities because remember, I'm trying to provide support for the students that needed additional support. I can see that they're discussion groups because of the way they show up here, and the lessons are built in. So the one for the students that are ready for the lesson, the multiplication with arrays, it's in there. That Nearpod activity has been added, but it's right here again, same place that I could individually assign. Right here, I only have one person in my class. I think it's Emily, but that's an example of how you would do it. If I had grading groups, I could add them as well, so I could do it either way. So just another fantastic way to differentiate and get the work out to the students. Before we move forward, I just want to ask, are there any questions about that strategy, about the THL materials? And I'm not the expert on that, but we probably have some people on this call who are. Any questions or comments about any of that before we move over to breakout rooms? Perfect. Same process. Think about how could these strategies support each of the various learning models that we're already familiar with. So in our breakout rooms, again, same process with discussion groups. How could you use this as a classroom teacher? We'll talk about is grading groups. I'm going to step back for just a moment. Donna asked me to go back to the discussion groups really quickly. And where I had placed them was under supporting activities. We could go ahead and I'm going to view this as this student. So if I had, were this a real lesson and I had more extensive information in here, I would have instructions for the students on what to discuss. Maybe they watch the video on the skip counting by 5. Perhaps I would have a Jamboard activity for them to work on it further. And they could comment back and forth regarding whatever the instructions are that I have. I'm going to go back as the teacher, and it was again the three different leveled activities that could have served there in that situation as a small group activity in the virtual or hybrid environment. I'm going to come back over to grading groups. That's the next thing that we'll look at. In this situation, again, just for consistency, so we're not having to think through lots of different things, we're looking at the grading groups, again, based on that pre-assessment that we talked about earlier. Here's a screenshot, and we'll be over to Schoology in just a moment to take a look at it. But again, we saw that we had students in that example, some students that were ready for the on-level learning, some students that needed just a little bit of help, and some students that maybe needed a whole lot of support. So a strategy that teachers could use is to differentiate the grading depending on the work that you think you're going to be assigning. So the grading groups feature is in Schoology. There are very specific instructions here. And again, they're linked on your idea pad as well. So you don't need to think about it there. So a few things to think about. Students that were not assigned to a particular assignment, they'll have a dash in the grading cell. That's going to prevent the teacher from accidentally giving a grade to a student that wasn't assigned that particular assignment. So just something to think about ahead of time. So I created a document just to help us think about what this grading could look like. Again, we have that teacher guide that I shared with you earlier that shows us very clearly, depending on what was missed, what the student is going to need, what help they're going to need. So based on that information, I created a grading group, and there is an example linked and probably on your idea pad as well. In this example, I have 3 different grading groups. So this grading group 1, that's the students that are going to need the most help. And so I have these various assignments, and I didn't click on all of these, but remember I told you Eureka Math provides you with the tools you need for all that differentiated instruction. So there it is. If they needed help with addition with arrays, I didn't have to go create it. It's already there for me. So that's a really great resource. So we have it in pictorial form and also without the pictures, both ways. So this grading group here, again, is that group that needs the most help, the most support, and eventually they will get to the on-level activities. They're just not there yet. We have that second group that needed a little bit of help. So that's this one here. Then we have the group 3, which is the ones that were ready for the on-level lesson. And I added here, I don't have an activity for it, but maybe another activity could be something enrichment based. And that's how it was, just for demonstration purposes, that's what the grading groups could look like. So I'm going to go over to Schoology. So within Schoology, I have already assigned my members to grading groups. So I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to my lesson, to my 3rd grade classroom lesson here. I would click on members. I only have Emily in here, but I could start to add to a grading group right there. The name of the group, group 1, group 2, group 3, and start adding students from there. So that's how it works. Again, the instructions are linked on your idea pad, and they're pretty straightforward. Again, thinking one important thing to consider as we go to our breakouts, which model is supported. Hopefully it's all three of them, we'll see. And are there any questions before we go to breakout?
Lucy, I wanted to ask a quick question that came from our breakout room, and I didn't know the answer, so I wanted to see if we could share it out or ask for everybody. One of the questions was, if someone is assigned a grading group, let's say they get grading group 1 based on their pre-assessment data, and maybe as they go through, they were kind of the squirrely kid who maybe, you know, did something on the pre-assessment, didn't try their best, but you notice like they're good to go. Can you change their from grading group 1 to grading group 2 in Schoology? And I think Emily's shaking her head yes. Okay, so that's the answer would be yes. Because so I figured that was the answer, but I just wanted to double check. Thanks so much.
So yeah, definitely it can be changed. And when you click on those instructions for grading groups, they'll give you a few tips and tricks for things to watch out for in terms of assignments and whether they were assigned before or after the change. So just those little things to watch out for.
Thanks so much.
But it is offered that, yeah, Schoology explained it all pretty well. And so that's one thing I would definitely read through that before changing grading groups. Awesome. Anything else? Okay, we are moving so fast. Choice boards. Choice boards are so fun. Okay, so in this section, we're going to create a choice board with 9 different assignment options. Again, like as in previous sections, I have the screenshot here, and we'll take a look in detail. We're all familiar with them by now. Really engaging. Students love it because they get choice in the work that they're going to be able to do. Some ways to apply it. Enrichment. We had talked about those on-level students that needed to move on to something else. We could really add some great enrichment activities here. But again, we know that spiraling back to previously taught content, even for students that that are already on level, spiraling back and helping them remember what's been taught. So that's another great component to add right there on the choice board. The various leveled options or just options based on student interest. And so some various ways to apply a choice board. So technical feature. There is not a specific technical feature in Schoology for choice boards, but there are ways to make sure that it is integrated with Schoology, because what we don't want, we don't want a whole separate activity, right? We know how to make a choice board, but how do we get it to work with Schoology so that when the students complete the work or don't complete the work, the teacher knows. So we're going to take a look at a few tricks for that. The very first thing to do is to create that choice board. I have some links here. What did I link? This is just, okay, this is a template. Should be a template. Now it's a template. So it's blank and it's available to you all as well. Nothing fancy, just the 9 boxes with various activities. Here it just says activity 1, activity 2, activity 3. Not very interesting to students, but when it's a real activity, we'll have a real name attached to it. So and maybe even a picture could be included as well, so that the students know what they're choosing or not choosing. So that's the template that's available. So you could create the template. You could do it in Google Docs. You could do it in Microsoft Word, whatever you prefer to work with. Each activity, though, would need to be entered as an assignment in Schoology, then linked back to the choice board. And so, again, if we have here, this is the actual example. You can see we had 9 activities. But with each of these 9 activities, now they're linked to Schoology. And I'll come over to Schoology in just a moment and show you that. Now they're linked to Schoology, so they're not just completing these 9 random activities that I can't keep track of as a teacher. They're either completing or not completing the activities, and I'll know it based on the results in Schoology. So I'm going to come back over to Schoology for just a moment. This one's a little bit trickier, only because, again, it's not a feature that's built in. So we're working it out in our own way. I have a folder. I called it Lesson 2 Choice Board. So that's the high level folder. If I open it up, what you'll see is, well, I'm gonna move past this for a moment. You can see there's a subfolder in here. I just called it CB for Choice Board. If I open that, I have the 9 activities. Remember, I had those 9 activities on the choice board. Now they're in Schoology. Again, these are just generic. They would be real activities in real life. So if I hover over activity 1 and I right click and I copy that link address, I can go back to my choice board and right there, it's already there, but I would just add the link right there. Come back over to Schoology, get my second link, copy link address, go back over to my choice board. Here, let me go ahead and remove this. I'm gonna remove 2 of them. So I need to link activities 2 and 3. So activity 2, I right click, copy link address, link it right there. One more, activity 3, right click, copy link address, and get it linked. Now, all of the activities are on my choice board. They're also in Schoology, so I'll be able to know who's completing what. And so that's what the final choice board looks like. Coming back over to Schoology. So now I have it here. Probably on a choice board, I wouldn't want to assign it to specific students, but I could. Could be graded or ungraded, either way. I'm going to close this out because remember, this is just the folder that contains my activities. Probably I don't want the students clicking here because there's another way for them to get to it. So I added an assignment under the primary choice board folder. I just called it Start Here. If they click there, I'm going to go view it as Emily. So there's the choice board. It would come up for her and she could just go straight to the activities from here. So she would know, okay, I completed activity 3. There it is. So that's just one way to kind of work within the tool that we have and get that choice board in there without having to keep it totally separate. Again, we have the link for the template. You probably also have the link for the example with the assignments linked. And there's a really quick instructional video that kind of walks you through it, what we just looked at. And so before we go to breakout rooms, are there any questions about this?
I do have a question. Can you go back to the Schoology?
Sure.
And okay, so because you can still see the folder there, can you hide it from the students?
You can't really hide it. I left it white just because to make it a little bit inconspicuous. I know that some people here. I know some people have done. Oh, sorry, I'm still a student. So no, I don't know of a way to hide it. What I have seen. The best you can do is rename it to the shortest name you can give it, which is a period, is the shortest name. So you could rename it to that, and it's just a little bit less conspicuous, but no, it's still there. And so that's why the Start Here is kind of really out there so that they go there to look at it. Not that it would hurt anything for them to go work from the assignments, but it doesn't have the same flair that it does working from a choice board.
And if you were to unpublish, they wouldn't be able to access assignments, right?
I think so. I think that's correct. Mm-hmm. Yep. Great question, though. Any other questions? out loud. I would love to know, we would love to know one takeaway to support differentiated instruction, either at your school, at your district, for your teachers. And so I'm gonna just put myself on mute and give you all a second to do that.
I'm just going to unmute and say I love the idea of the discussions, the discussion groups like that. I mean, we've done discussion post, but not in a differentiated fashion yet. So I'm excited to try the discussion with various groups of students or teachers in our aspect of it.
Awesome. Any other takeaways?
I'm excited to start playing with and looking at the grading groups. That's something that's new for us, and so being able to build those learning paths in those groups, and so just kind of that's one of the things that I'm already thinking how we can get our team to start practicing and playing with that.
Yep, that's definitely advanced differentiation there for sure. In the chat, endless possibilities. Excited about about group differentiation for discussions with data. So yeah, that's always the key. Differentiating with grading groups, valuable feature. Anything else y'all want to share out? Okay, and we're almost out of time. Mitzi, is there anything else that you want to add? Or our team at TEA as well?
Yeah, we definitely have a survey for this session that I believe Teresa is going to, there she is, fast as lightning, dropping that in the chat. You know, obviously would love feedback on the session itself. And then I believe there's a couple of questions that just, you know, what would you like to learn more about with regards to support with your LMS? And we just wanted to thank everybody for, you know, taking time out of their day. I know there's a lot of different opportunities that you're able to join and your calendars are busy. So we appreciate the great discussion in breakout rooms and just your attentiveness to learn more about how to use your LMS to differentiate. So we appreciate it. Mega, Mavis, Teresa, do y'all have anything else that you would like to add?
I'll just say thanks so much for being here on a Friday morning. It was great. I enjoyed learning alongside you all. Please do fill out the survey. We love to get everyone's input and ideas for new sessions. That truly is how we decide what to offer. So please share your thinking in that link that Teresa shared. And keep in mind that these materials are all yours to use and share with your teachers. So take them, use them. We'll send out a session recording and a link to the survey deck this afternoon. So please do use those materials to help your teachers and your students. So with that, thank you all so much and hope to see you at the next session.